On August 25, 1980, Ruppert Jones chased a Tony Armas fly ball toward the outfield wall at the Oakland Alameda County Coliseum. Jones hit the wall and separated his shoulder. His season was over. Surgery followed. The New York Yankees went on to win 103 games and the American League East, but their center fielder could not play in October. By the next opening day, he was gone. It looks like the collision that changed everything, except that 2 years later, Ruppert Jones was an all-star again. So what did that wall actually do to the first star in Seattle Mariners history? Oakland's Coliseum was a broad concrete bowl, with the Athletics in green and gold and the visiting Yankees in road gray. The sound of the bat sent Jones across the outfield after Armas's fly ball. The warning track ran toward the wall, and the chase ended in a collision hard enough to separate the shoulder of a 25-year-old center fielder. Whatever remained of that play, the medical consequence was clear. Jones needed season-ending surgery. The next time the Yankees played meaningful baseball, their season had continued without him. That absence carried unusual weight. Jones had spent his first years in the majors playing for a new franchise with no postseason expectations. New York was different. The Yankees had acquired him after the best all-around season of his career, placed him in center field, and batted him second. Now the club was headed toward October, and the player brought in to help them get there could not take the field. The timing makes the collision an obvious dividing line. Before Oakland, Jones had been an everyday center fielder with power, speed, and 2 seasons of all-star recognition in his immediate future and past. Afterward came surgery, a changing Yankees outfield, a trade, and eventually a career spent moving among teams and roles. But sequence does not settle cause. Jones was hitting .223 when he was injured, already well below the level he had reached in Seattle. And the strongest challenge to a simple injury explanation was still ahead. He would return to center field, return to everyday work, and return to the All-Star game. To understand what might have been lost in Oakland, the record has to go back to the player Jones had become before he ever put on Yankee pinstripes. Ruppert Sanderson Jones was born in Dallas in 1955 and moved to California before his teenage years. At Berkeley High School, he was more than a baseball prospect. He earned all East Bay recognition in baseball, basketball, and football, and received football scholarship offers from Arizona State, Oregon State, and California. Jones chose baseball because he considered himself a better outfielder than a wide receiver. The Kansas City Royals selected him in the 3rd round of the 1973 amateur draft. Over 3 minor league seasons, he hit .287 with 38 home runs and 173 runs batted in, enough production to put a major league job within reach by the spring of 1976. Kansas City had an opening in right field. Jones competed for it and had a respectable spring, but Tom Puckett won the position. Just before the regular season began, Jones was sent back to AAA Omaha. It was the first important pattern in his professional career. Jones could perform well and still find his place controlled by the shape of somebody else's roster. He answered the demotion with power. In roughly half a season at Omaha, he hit 19 home runs and drove in 73 runs. Kansas City called him up for the second half. In his second major league game against the Chicago White Sox, Jones collected 2 hits and drove in 3 runs in an 8-3 Royals victory. The first extended opportunity never arrived, however. He finished the season as a 4th outfielder and left-handed bench bat, hitting .216 with 1 home run. That limited major league line did not reflect how the Royals evaluated his future. Manager Whitey Herzog called Jones one of the 3 best prospects in the organization. Kansas City also understood that leaving him unprotected in the coming expansion draft would probably mean losing him. The Royals had considerable young talent, and Jones did not fit their plans closely enough to protect. On November 5, 1976,
The Seattle Mariners began choosing the players who would become the first roster in franchise history. Actor Danny Kaye, part of the Mariners ownership group, announced the opening selection. The name was Ruppert Jones. It was the first pick of an expansion draft, not the amateur draft that identifies the best young player in the country. Still, the symbolism was unmistakable. Before Seattle had played an inning of Major League Baseball, Jones was the first player chosen to help define what Mariners baseball might become. Kansas City's crowded depth chart had turned into the opportunity of his career. If you remember the Kingdome in those first Seattle seasons, you remember how different baseball could look and sound beneath that immense concrete roof. The outfield stretched across artificial turf under indoor light. Contact off the bat carried into the dome's enclosed acoustics. There was no long franchise history for a new player to live up to because the history was being made in real time. Jones gave those early Mariners something immediately recognizable. His left-handed power supplied the home runs. His range in center field gave the club an athletic presence at one of the game's most demanding positions. Seattle fans responded, and by the middle of the Mariners' first season, Jones had become the first all-star representative the franchise ever sent to the game. At the 1977 break, he was hitting .256 with 17 home runs and 50 runs batted in.
Those numbers gave a first-year club more than production. They gave Seattle a player other fans around the league had to notice. Jones finished the season at .263 with 24 home runs and 76 RBIs, and Topps selected him as the center fielder on its rookie all-star team. At 22 years old, the former Kansas City reserve had become the most visible young player on an expansion franchise. Center field was central to that value. On May 16, 1978, in an extra-inning game against Detroit, Jones recorded 12 putouts, tying the major league record for an outfielder in that kind of game. 12 batted balls became outs in his glove. It was one afternoon's fielding total, but it gave a concrete measure to the range Seattle fans were seeing. Then his season was interrupted by a medical problem far from the outfield wall. Jones underwent an appendectomy in the middle of June. He did not return until late July, and after coming back, he hit .214 for the rest of the season. His final numbers fell to a .235 average, 6 home runs, and 46 RBIs. That 1978 season matters to the investigation because it shows that Jones's career had already been affected by a significant physical interruption before the shoulder injury in Oakland. It also shows that one difficult return did not establish a permanent decline. Healthy again in 1979, Jones played all 162 games. Every day on the schedule, Seattle could write his name into the lineup. He set career highs with 109 runs, 166 hits, 9 triples, 78 RBIs, and 33 stolen bases. The 109 runs became a Mariners season record. His speed placed him among the American League leaders, and his ability to combine it with power made him one of the league's more dangerous power-speed players. Before the All-Star break, Jones had already reached at least 15 home runs and 15 stolen bases. No other Mariner would do both that early in a season for another 19 years. For an expansion franchise still forming its identity, Jones had become the rare player who could change a game in several ways. He could drive the ball, take the extra base, score in volume, and cover center field. The 1979 season was the clearest evidence of his ceiling. It was also the end of his time in Seattle. On November 1st, the Mariners traded Jones and pitcher Jim Lewis to the Yankees for Rick Anderson, Jim Beattie, Juan Beniquez, and Jerry Narron. 4 players went to Seattle in the deal. Jones went to a team built to contend immediately. That trade changed the terms of his career. In Seattle, he had been the first selection, the first all-star, and the everyday center fielder of a new organization. In New York, he was entering a club where winning the division was the expectation, and where the roster could be remade quickly when another opportunity appeared. 10 months after the trade, Jones reached the wall in Oakland.
The question now was whether the Yankees had acquired a rising center fielder whose career was then redirected by one violent collision, or whether that night became only the most dramatic event in a transition that had several causes. The next year in New York and the comeback that followed in San Diego would begin to separate those possibilities. In 1980, Jones remained New York's primary center fielder and usually batted second. Through August 25, he was hitting .223 with 9 home runs and 42 RBIs. That was a substantial drop from his 1979 season in Seattle, though it did not make him marginal. He still occupied a premium defensive position near the top of the order for the best team in the American League East. Then came the collision in Oakland, the separated shoulder, and the surgery. Jones filed suit against Athletics owner Charlie Finley after the season, but the available record here does not establish the grounds or outcome of that action. What can be established is the baseball consequence. Jones had no chance to return before the Yankees season ended. While he rehabilitated, New York's roster continued to move. During the winter meetings, Jones was rumored to be part of a rare trade between the Yankees and the Boston Red Sox. That deal never happened. New York then signed Dave Winfield, one of the most important free agents of the era, adding another star outfielder to a club that already had little patience for uncertainty.
On March 31, 1981, the Yankees sent Jones, Joe LaFavre, Tim Lawler, and Chris Welsh to the San Diego Padres for Jerry Mumphrey and John Pacella. The trade followed the injury, but timing alone cannot tell us why it happened. Jones had been hitting .223 before he reached the wall. The Yankees added Winfield afterward. The organization had also been willing to discuss moving Jones to Boston before finally sending him to San Diego. Health, performance, and roster construction were all part of the same winter, and the source does not allow any one of them to carry the entire explanation. San Diego would provide a much cleaner test. If the shoulder had permanently taken away the player Seattle once knew, it would show in the work Jones could no longer perform. If he could return to regular duty in center and again produce at an all-star level, then Oakland had been a severe interruption rather than a complete dividing line. The 1981 season itself was fractured by the players' strike. Baseball split the standings into 2 halves, and San Diego finished last in both of them. Jones hit .249 and tied for the team lead with 53 runs scored. He also hit 34 doubles, second most in the National League, and handled the majority of the Padres' work in center field. The role mattered as much as the line. After surgery and a trade, Jones was again being asked to patrol the middle of a major league outfield.
San Diego was not treating him as a player whose shoulder had made regular center field duty impossible. Then, in the first half of 1982, the old combination returned. Jones reached the All-Star break hitting .312 with 11 home runs and 50 RBIs. San Diego was in second place in the National League West, and Jones was selected as the Padres' only representative in the All-Star game. 5 years after becoming the first All-Star in Mariners history, he had earned the honor again with another young West Coast club. Around San Diego, the connection became visible in Padre yellow. Rupe's Troops t-shirts appeared in the stands, a fan following built around the center fielder who had arrived from New York with a repaired shoulder and something left to prove on the field. At the All-Star game, players still wore the uniforms of their own clubs, turning the field into a bright collection of colors, letterings, and identities from around the league. Jones waded through the opening innings in San Diego's brown and yellow before leading off the bottom of the third. He came to the plate as the Padres' only representative, his name announced among the stars of the National League. In his only at-bat, Jones hit a triple. 3 bases carried him to third, where he stood with the innings suddenly shaped around him. Pete Rose followed with a sacrifice fly, and Jones came home with a National League run. His entire night at the plate could fit into one line of a box score. 1 at-bat,
One triple, one run. But the scale of the moment was larger. 2 years after the Oakland wall had removed him from a pennant race, Jones had returned to baseball's midsummer stage and made an immediate impact. A single at-bat could not answer every medical question surrounding his shoulder. His first half already had. Jones was hitting for average, producing runs, hitting with power, and playing center field well enough to become an all-star again. Whatever lasting effects the 1980 separation may have had, the available evidence cannot support the idea that it permanently ended his ability to perform at a high level. The more difficult question was why that revival did not lead to another long period of stability. Jones appeared in 133 games for the Padres in 1983. It was his lightest workload in a full season that had not been interrupted by a major injury. He became a free agent that winter, and San Diego acquired Carmelo Martinez from the Chicago Cubs. With another outfielder added to the roster, Jones became expendable. Once again, the change arrived through a mixture of performance, role, and organizational planning. There is no documented new physical event in 1983 comparable to the appendectomy in Seattle or the shoulder separation in Oakland. The Padres simply moved in another direction. Jones was 28 years old, a two-time All-Star, and without a major league job.
He went to spring training with the Pittsburgh Pirates in 1984, but failed to make the club. A week into the regular season, the Detroit Tigers signed him and assigned him to AAA Evansville. The first player in Mariners history was back in the minors. That could have been the quiet end of the case. Instead, Jones hit .313 with 9 home runs and 45 RBIs for Evansville. By the beginning of June, he had earned another call to the majors. The team waiting for him was no ordinary club. Detroit had started the 1984 season with one of the greatest opening runs in baseball history and was already separating itself from the American League East. Chet Lemon occupied center field. Larry Herndon played left. Jones no longer arrived as the centerpiece of an expansion franchise or as the Yankees' everyday center fielder. The Tigers used him in a platoon with Herndon and occasionally gave Lemon a day away from center. Jones had entered the part-time phase of his career. That description said something about his place on the depth chart. It did not yet define what he could do with a baseball. On June 24, 1984, the Milwaukee Brewers came into Tiger Stadium, the old ballpark at Michigan and Trumbull, where the upper deck seemed to press down toward the field. In right, the layered grandstand rose to its familiar roofline. The structure gave a hitter a target that appeared less like part of a ballpark than the top edge of one. Milwaukee right-hander Tom Tellman faced Jones. Jones connected and sent the ball toward right field, above the wall, above the seats, and over the roof itself. For a moment, the flight carried beyond the normal frame of the game. The crowd noise rolled beneath the overhanging decks as the ball disappeared out of the stadium. Jones circled the bases in a Tigers uniform, only weeks removed from AAA, having hit one of the shots by which old Tiger Stadium measured left-handed power. That home run gave Detroit a name for him, Rooftop Ruppert. It also gave his comeback a lasting image. Jones hit 9 major league home runs that season, 6 of them at Tiger Stadium. He finished at .284 with 37 RBIs while working around Detroit's established outfielders. A player Pittsburgh had released at the end of spring had found a useful place on a 104-win team. The Tigers coasted into October. Jones went hitless in 8 combined at-bats during the American League Championship Series and World Series. His former club from San Diego came out of the National League, placing him across the field from the Padres in the final round. Detroit won the World Series. The postseason did not provide Jones with a signature hit. The championship still became part of his career, earned through a season in which he had climbed from Evansville to a role on the best team in baseball. Then the old question returned. What role did a club believe he deserved next?
Detroit viewed Jones as a part-time player at this stage and was prepared to pay him accordingly. Negotiations became bitter. The available source does not record the full substance of that dispute or Jones's own account of it, but the outcome was clear. He left the Tigers as a free agent and signed with the California Angels. The label followed him. The production did not always obey it. In 1985, the Angels used Jones as a fourth outfielder and designated hitter. Given that role, he hit 21 home runs. Only Reggie Jackson hit more for California. That total did not make Jones an everyday center fielder again. It showed that the gradual narrowing of his job had moved ahead of the disappearance of his power. Clubs were choosing more carefully when and where to use him, and Jones could still change games within those limits. In 1986, Jones and Jackson effectively switched responsibilities. Jackson took more of the designated hitter work, while Jones received most of his playing time in right field. By then, the center fielder once known for covering the Kingdome turf had adapted to the corner. The Angels won the American League West, sending Jones back to the postseason for the second time in 3 years. He collected 3 hits in the American League Championship Series against Boston, scored 4 runs, and drove in 2. His contribution was measurable. So was the outcome. California lost the series in heartbreaking fashion.
For Angels fans who lived through that October, the pain of the Boston series has never required much explanation. Jones's place in it tends to occupy a smaller corner of the memory, but he was there, 31 years old, playing right field after years of trades and changing assignments, producing runs in another chance to reach the World Series. By 1987, the contraction became unmistakable. Jones did not make his first plate appearance until California's 8th game. He finished with only 213 trips to the plate, hitting 8 home runs and driving in 28. Even in limited time, the power had not disappeared completely. The opportunities had. Jones made his final major league appearance on October 4, 1987, against Cleveland. He received 1 at-bat and did not get a hit. At 32, after 12 major league seasons, his big league record closed without a farewell tour or a ceremonial final moment. His effort to continue playing was not over. In the spring of 1988, the Milwaukee Brewers invited Jones to camp in Tucson as a non-roster player. He hit well, according to the source, but did not make the club. In early May, he signed a minor league contract with the Texas Rangers and reported to the Oklahoma City 89ers. The response was immediate. During his second week with Oklahoma City, Jones earned American Association Player of the Week honors. Once more, performance had opened at least the possibility of another return. His stay lasted 50 games.
Jones then left for Japan and signed with the Hanshin Tigers. The following year, he came back to Oklahoma City for one more attempt. By then, the shoulder evidence was no longer ambiguous. Jones had a torn rotator cuff and a torn labrum. After 27 games in 1989, he stopped playing. The record does not establish a medical connection between those injuries and the shoulder separation he suffered in Oakland 9 years earlier. They involved the same general part of the body, but similarity and sequence are not enough to prove causation. The 1989 damage belongs in the story as the documented physical end of his final comeback, not as automatic proof that the wall had been determining every season since 1980. So what did that collision actually change? It changed the 1980 season immediately and severely. Jones needed surgery. He missed the postseason, while the Yankees won 103 games and the American League East. He lost his ability to defend his place in the lineup during a winter when New York added Dave Winfield and considered other outfield moves. By the following spring, Jones had been traded. The wall therefore matters. It interrupted a prominent job on a contender at exactly the wrong time. The larger career, however, continued to resist a single-cause explanation. Jones returned to regular center field duty with San Diego. In 1982, he hit .312 with 11 home runs and 50 RBIs by the All-Star break, then tripled and scored in the All-Star game. Those facts carry more weight than any assumption that the shoulder had permanently ended his prime in Oakland. His transition into part-time work unfolded over several years. Production fluctuated. Teams acquired other outfielders. His defensive assignments moved from center to left, then to right and designated hitter. Pittsburgh released him. Detroit valued him as a reserve even after he hit .284 for a championship team. California initially used him as a fourth outfielder, and he answered with 21 home runs. By 1987, age and reduced opportunity had narrowed his role dramatically. In 1989, a torn rotator cuff and torn labrum ended the last attempt. How much the original separation affected the years between those points cannot be determined confidently from the available evidence. The career itself deserves to be measured on its actual scale. Jones played 12 major league seasons for 6 clubs. He collected 1,103 hits, hit 147 home runs, made 2 All-Star teams, and won a World Series. He once played every one of Seattle's 162 games, scoring 109 runs and stealing 33 bases. His speed, power, and center field range made him the first recognizable star of a franchise beginning from nothing. He also spent much of his career having his place reconsidered by somebody else. Kansas City viewed him as one of its best prospects and left him exposed because of organizational depth. Seattle made him its first selection, then traded him after his finest season.
New York put him in center for a contender, then rebuilt its outfield while he recovered from surgery. San Diego made him an all-star and later made room for another player. Detroit gave him a championship opportunity while defining him as part-time. California found useful power in that smaller role before his playing time finally receded. That pattern matters because it changes the emotional shape of the story. Jones did not simply rise in Seattle, hit a wall in Oakland, and fade. He kept returning in different forms, as San Diego's only all-star, as rooftop Ruppert in Detroit, as a 21-home-run reserve in California, and eventually as a veteran trying to earn one more opening through Oklahoma City. In November 1976, Danny Kaye called Ruppert Jones's name as the first selection in the Mariners' expansion draft. It was a public beginning, attached to the arrival of a new major league franchise. 13 years later, torn structures in his shoulder brought the last comeback to an end after 27 minor league games. Between those two moments was a career larger and more complicated than the collision often positioned at its center. Oakland took away in October and accelerated a period of uncertainty. It did not take away Jones's ability to become an all-star again. The years that followed were shaped by changing performance, changing rosters, changing positions, and eventually injuries that the record can document without pretending to connect them. Ruppert Jones should be remembered as Seattle's first star, but his career did not belong to Seattle alone. It belonged to the Padres fans in Rupe's Troops shirts, to the ball that cleared the Tiger Stadium roof, to a championship club that had first sent him to AAA, and to an Angels team that found 21 home runs in a player already classified as a reserve. The first Mariner spent the rest of his career learning how temporary any place in baseball could be. The record shows how often he earned another one.